Hello and welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We appreciate your time and I hope that you get a lot out of this episode. I know I am really looking forward to having this conversation with the wonderful Joy Stone because the topic is, if I'm so spiritual, why am I still so anxious? And when I first came across Joy's work, I thought to myself, this is the best topic. And it is actually the topic of her book. So she is well educated in this area. She's even published a book on it. So let's dive into this juicy topic very soon. But first of all, I want to share a little bit about Joy Stone. She is a Nashville-based soul connection coach. Oh my gosh, I can't talk properly today. I've been doing too many live recordings. Let me re-say that. She is a soul connection coach, best-selling author, and expert in yoga psychology and positive psychology. She is dedicated to empowering self-aware, high-achieving women to rediscover their true selves, tap into inner peace, and step into their power to heal, align, and elevate their soul's journey. Joy is passionate about helping individuals overcome secret fear and anxiety that may be holding them back. Welcome to the podcast, Joy. Me too. And I know before we hit record, you're like, it's 7 p.m. where I'm at, it's snowing, and your energy's so different at this time of day. I'm like, yeah, totally feel you, totally get you. I'm not an afternoon or evening person either. It's 11 a.m. where I'm recording from. However, I've already jumbled up my words, so I think it's all good. Isn't it? And I'm a day ahead too. So it's a Tuesday here and you're a Monday. But I love it. Yeah, we're different, completely different parts of the world, but still coming together on this one topic, which I'm really looking forward to diving into. But before we do, I want to hit you with my rapid inspiration question, just so we get to know you a little bit better. So, what's the most unconventional or unexpected thing on your bucket list? No, it sounds amazing. My next question, if you had a theme song for your life, what would it be and why? That's good. I like it. You will survive. And your favorite food and why? It is so good. It is absolutely my favorite. If my friends ever invite me around or invite me out and they say we're going to have tacos, I'm like, I'm there. I'm so there. Even though, as we mentioned, I'm not a night owl. I like to be at home in the evenings. But if it's for tacos, I'm out. I'm done. I'll go there. So, why did you write your book and who did you write it for? Tell me a little bit about this. And let's no, first of all, tell me a little bit more about yourself and what led you to writing this book and why you wrote it and who you wrote it for. Yes. Mm. 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 I can see why you chose the song I Will Survive. It makes complete sense now why it came to you. And wow, yeah, what a story. And when you have that calling for to study something so powerful such as like yoga philosophy, which is also shares the same philosophies as Ayurveda. I mean, yoga is the sister science to Ayurveda. And I think that these deeper callings, it's really this innate power where we've sort of tapped into this wisdom before. And I like to say it's like the ancient sages have always said, if you are being called to study this, for a lot of us, it's not the first time. It's sort of this ingrained innate wisdom that is just waiting to be exposed and experienced in this lifetime, in this modern world, because there are so many people at the moment who aren't in touch with reality. So we've got the two sides of the spectrum, which is why I'm so interested to learn more about what your book title, right? This whole conversation is because there are so many people who go down that spiritual path. They call it the spiritual path, but it's so far from it. They're using it to disguise who they or how they truly feel, and they do all the teachings, they learn all the things, but they actually don't implement it, so they're not really on that spiritual path. They hide behind the teachings, and that can be really, really frustrating, because some of these quote unquote spiritual people that I have come across have been some of the most judgmental, some of the most nastiest people, and who can't deal with what life is throwing at them, which is what these philosophies and teachings are really teaching us how to do, how to sit with these things. And I really noticed this in 2020, and I'm sure everyone knows what I'm referring to, when the world broke out into craziness, right? And it was really, really interesting for me to see that, being so part of that community and being like, hang on, guys, like, what we learn in these philosophies, what we have dedicated our life to learning, you are doing the complete opposite. There is so much judgment coming through you. There is not one clear path to for anybody. And also the ridiculing people because they're not woke enough, they're not awake, this and that. It's like we're all on our own path, and we don't know how many times we've been on this path before, or anyone else. And so I found myself getting really frustrated, and then I was judging myself for for that, because I'm like, well, hang a minute, now you're judging. Oh my gosh, it was just this whirlwind of confusion for me, which also triggered my anxiety. And I even sort of shunned that spiritual world and part of me, which did not feel good at all, because that is one of the beauties and the loves I have about Ayurveda is health alchemy, having optimal health as a spiritual being and a human being in this world is encompassing the spiritual aspects of self, the mental, the emotional, the physical, and the dharmic aspects of self. You can't separate them, because that isn't conducive to holistic health and stepping into your higher self. But that's exactly what I did to myself. I just like separated it all, because I was getting so frustrated with the quote unquote spiritual world. And then I'm thinking, well, if they're so spiritual, I'm so spiritual, why am I having all these judgment, these feelings, these stress, this anxiety? Exactly what you are talking about. So sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent, but yeah. Mm, yeah. Yeah. And it can be upsetting, because you're like, it's not showing the truth of what this philosophy and these teachings are, and it could be super frustrating. And again, I'm also not sitting here saying that I have perfected it, I 100% understand everything, and I show up as my higher self and in my true wisdom all the time, because I absolutely do not. Like, you can ask my husband and my kids, like, I don't. We're all learning on this path. But yes, I think There is so much to unpack there. But before we do, why did you write the book? Like, how did that come about? Mm, mm. Yeah. Absolutely. And so, how did you do that? Like, what are some of the practical steps that you went through after you recognized that it's not just about chanting, it's not just about going to yoga classes, it's not doing all the things to appear spiritual and maybe even feel somewhat a little bit better about yourself, but to really transform and change? Like, what were the actual things that were a game changer for you? Mm. Absolutely. Knowing and embodying are such different things. And it's what I teach my students in the Ayurveda Alchemist Academy is you go through the program and yes, you become a certified Ayurveda and women's holistic health coach at the end of it. But to get there, you have to embody the teachings. You have to embody the practice for yourself because knowing information, like, I mean, Google is full of information. ChatGPT is full of information, but they don't have that deep core wisdom and they can't embody that information that they spit out. So we don't need to be another walking Google. You know, might sound great at parties. You might come up with all these interesting conversational points, but we need to be a walking embodiment of our higher self and who we truly are. And that is through doing the work, not reading the work. It is being the work. And I I totally agree with you that there are many women who are reading all of the personal development books, doing all the programs, because that's almost the fun stuff, right? That's the, oh, this is making me have the feel goods. But they're not then going and taking that information and implementing that information. And that is where true wisdom comes from. And they're still struggling, even though they have access to more information and tools than ever before. So, why do you think this is so? What's your take on that? Mm, mm, absolutely. And are probably a little afraid to actually sit with how they're truly feeling instead of bypassing those emotions and those feelings and be like, oh, I'm just going to breathe, I'm just going to breathe. But no, like, why are you feeling that way? Like, really take a deep dive into that. There's so many answers in that as well. And yeah, breath work is amazing. It is such a beautiful tool. I teach Vedic breathwork certifications, and it's wonderful to prescribe to clients, especially clients with anxiety, but it may take more than just 3 breaths. And it's not just the breaths. The breaths are changing you on that physical level. So they're moving your stress hormones to lower level. There, your parasympathetic nervous system is kicking in, you're allowing the sympathetic nervous system to relax and everything to sort of come back into more of a balanced state. We're finding that homeostasis within the body and the mind, and that's what's happening on a very true physical level of that breath work, depending if you're doing the right breath work for your mind body constitution. That's a whole nother episode. But when you're there, the emotions may not go straight away, but you're in more of a receptive, more of an open, more of an intuitive reasoning to understand what's happening and why, and to see it for what it is, and to be okay in that space and hold that space for yourself. I've had to do this recently for myself, feeling either anxious or frustrated, or whatever those sort of more fear-based thoughts were coming up, and I did turn to my breath because it's literally the only thing that would settle me in that moment and allow me to come back into my body and into my mind and to really understand what's going on. But it took more than 3 breaths. I really had to be there with it. I had to allow myself to feel the experience, to understand the experience, and allow that emotion to be part of my experience in that day. And that's okay. That's okay. Like you said, it's not fun. It's not fun. I could have been like, okay, I'm just going to go for a walk and put a podcast on and breathe and ignore and fill my brain with information, because I've done that too. Like, to be honest, I do that sometimes. If I want to bypass my own emotions, I will pop on a podcast and completely try to ignore how I'm feeling. But it always comes back to bite me in the ass. So I've learned to be with the feelings, sit with the feelings, allow those emotions to move through you. So do you have a tip, or multiple tips if you like, on for self-aware high achieving women who secretly struggle with anxiety or second guess themselves all the time? Like, what can they do? I know you said the tools aren't the answer, but what do you have any tools that can get them the answer maybe? Yeah. I love that practice. I often start my day with asking myself, how do I want to feel and what does that look like? And I've given that exercise to many of my clients as well. But the way in which you said to think of somebody else, how they present, because sometimes it's hard to see it for yourself if that's not how you're feeling. So I like that example of think of what somebody else that you know looks like if they were to be experiencing that. So then you can like start to put yourself, it's almost like, you know, your avatar. You can start to put yourself in their shoes and walk in their shoes and then start to embody it and then start to really feel it for yourself. So that's a great tip, that one. I love that. What is the biggest mistake people make when they want more self-belief, inner peace, or self-trust? What do you think is the biggest sort of mistake that people make when they're trying to chase this self-belief if they don't already have it? Mm, yeah, absolutely. You mentioned positive psychology. So, can you just share what is the difference between positive psychology and Ayurvedic psychology, for instance, or yoga psychology? Like, how does that differ and help in these situations? Mm. 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 So how come people who have gone through a similar circumstance, like for instance yourself, the story that you shared, that what you went through as a child, how come some people can turn out like you and then some people can go down that route of addiction and self-harm and destruction? Mm. Yeah, no, that was great. That totally answered it. Thank you. That was, yeah, spot on. And it just made me think of like when we want the world around us to change, we've got to change the way that we perceive things. That is what you were saying. Like we have to change our perspective because it's not always that the things are going to change. Like, if you got a flat tire, you've just got to deal with it. But you can deal with it in a numerous amount of ways. And it comes down to the way that you perceive the happenings of that event. And another thing I would like to discuss and probably wrap it up with is in your book, you discuss the concept of stepping into your personal power. And you also just mentioned it I don't know, now last question maybe, not that long ago in the podcast as well. So how do you define personal power, and what practical steps can listeners take to cultivate and harness their own inner strength and personal power? Mhm. Mm, perfect. Well, Vedic philosophy and psychology is not ever. And no, I love that. I mean, as I mentioned in the Ayurveda Alchemist program, we really ask that the students embody the practice, and the niyamas and the yamas are one of the first things we teach in the Ayurvedic psychology and philosophy modules, which come before everything else, because I think it's really that foundation of the science of Ayurveda and the science of yoga, is to really start to understand that philosophy and the psychology before we can move into all of the nutrition, all of the women's health components, the hormones, cleansing, all of those wonderful things. But at the core essence, we need to understand the psychology, the philosophy, the functioning, and the working of the mind, because it's such a powerful tool. It can either be our best friend or our worst enemy. And the way that we can train it and befriend it is going to help with the trajectory of our life. So there, totally. And this conversation has been so fun. I don't know if fun, it has been fun for me, but it's more than fun. It's enlightening. I don't know. I'm not finding the right word to describe this conversation, but I feel like it has been just so true. I've just loved this conversation. So I really appreciate you coming on and just sharing your wisdom and all of your knowledge on positive psychology and yoga psychology. Is there any parting words that you haven't been able to express that you would like to say before we wrap the episode up? Yeah, totally. And that might mean go and have more fun. Stop being so serious about life and everything. I mean, this was a very serious conversation, but at the end of the day, take it and go have fun with it. Yeah, yeah. So where can our listeners get in contact with you, learn more about you? Amazing. And your book is available everywhere. Yeah, yeah. We love Audible. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate all of our listeners for tuning in. And if you do have any questions, you want to keep this kind of conversation going, then please join us in the Ayurveda and Women's Health Sisterhood Facebook group, where you can, yeah, keep this conversation going well beyond the podcast. Namaste.